The ranch lay at the edge of nowhere, a stretch of land where the wind carried dust across wooden fences, and silence hung heavier than the midday heat. For years, the woman lived there alone, her life stripped of the noise of command, the endless voices of soldiers and the constant weight of war. Once, she had been a general whose name was spoken with respect across continents, but time had shifted her from the chaos of battlefields to a quiet existence where the only orders she gave were to herself, and the only troops she managed were the aging horses grazing in her pastures. Age had bent her shoulders but had not weakened her gaze, and in the depths of her eyes remained the glint of a strategist who had seen too much blood spilled under banners and causes that no longer mattered. Her days followed the same rhythm. At dawn she checked the fences, patched what had loosened overnight, shoveled hay, and ensured the barn doors still held strong against the biting winds. She sharpened her tools with the same precision she once reserved for blades and rifles. She prepared her meals sparingly, ate in silence, and spent evenings staring at the horizon as if expecting the world to send one last challenge her way. Each night she sat with a lantern on the porch, memories drifting like ghosts around her. The faces of young men and women who had followed her into fire, the sound of explosions that once seemed permanent, the orders she had given that could never be taken back. Out here, no one asked her for decisions. No one saluted her. No one reminded her of who she used to be. That anonymity was both a relief and a punishment. Still, even in solitude, her senses remained sharp. A general never truly retired, only relocated. She noticed the changes in wind, the way the ground carried vibrations, the subtle patterns of the night sky. She saw danger before it reached her, though in the years since she had left uniform behind, no real danger had come. Until the night it did. It began subtly as most things did. The horses grew restless, stamping and shifting in their stalls. Dogs barked into the darkness, growls low and uncertain. The air felt charged as though a storm was near, though the sky showed no signs of lightning. When she stepped outside, lantern in hand, she noticed movement above, small points of light darting unnaturally, too fast, too precise. She knew every type of aircraft built by humans, every drone, every fighter jet, every satellite path. What she saw did not belong to Earth. The light shimmered, shifted formation, then vanished as if swallowed whole by the stars. She stayed awake through the night, listening. The wind carried no sound of engines, but something had disturbed the natural order. By morning she found new tracks in the soil, pressed deep, too wide for human boots, too heavy for cattle. The spacing was irregular, as if 5 figures staggered their way through rough terrain. She followed the impressions, rifle in hand, until the trail stopped near the old windmill. There she found them, 5 beings collapsed in the dirt, their bodies alien yet undeniably soldiers. Their armor was cracked, dented, marked by weapons she had never seen. They were taller than humans, their skin shades ranging from pale gray to deep blue, their eyes glinting with intelligence and fatigue. They breathed heavily, wounds seeping strange fluids, each movement pained. Their weapons, though advanced, lay discarded at a distance, as if abandoned for fear of provoking her. One raised its head, tried to speak, and failed. A second produced a device that flickered before forming rough translations in English. Shelter. The word emerged, broken, distorted. Safe. Please. Her instincts screamed caution. In her long life, she had learned that war was never far behind soldiers, no matter what species they belonged to. Helping them could bring conflict crashing into her quiet life. Yet leaving them to die in the dirt felt no different from abandoning the wounded under her command decades ago. She studied them, assessing not only their injuries but their formation, the way they instinctively positioned themselves around each other even in weakness. Soldiers, without doubt. Deserters, maybe. Enemies, possibly. But at that moment, they were only dying beings asking for mercy. Without a word, she gestured with her rifle, directing them toward the barn. 2 of them tried to rise, stumbled, and fell again. Her patience had its limits. With practiced authority, she barked an order: move. If you can stand, stand. If not, crawl. They understood enough. Slowly, with agonized effort, the 5 dragged themselves to the barn. Inside, she cleared a space among bales of hay. Her hands worked with efficiency that came not from medicine but from battlefield triage. Bandages were torn from old sheets, antiseptics retrieved from her stores, needles threaded with precise calm. She treated wounds that bled colors unfamiliar, adjusted broken armor to prevent further strain, and forced watered-down throats that struggled to swallow. They obeyed without protest, too weak to resist a commanding tone that made clear she expected compliance. Once stabilized, they watched her in silence. One of them, its face angular and scarred, stared intently at the insignia sewn onto the faded jacket she wore. It raised a trembling hand, pointing. In halting translation, the device conveyed its words. You warrior, known, human general. She stiffened. That part of her life was meant to remain buried here on the ranch, away from prying eyes. Yet even out in the galaxy, her reputation had reached ears not of Earth. That revelation chilled her. It meant humanity was not as isolated as it believed. It meant these strangers knew of her past in ways she had not imagined possible. She demanded answers. Where did they come from? Why were they here? What conflict had dragged them across light years only to collapse on her soil? Slowly, through fragmented speech, the truth unfolded. They had been soldiers in a vast interstellar war, conscripts in an empire that viewed its warriors as expendable tools. They had deserted, fleeing the front lines, pursued by forces determined to hunt them down for betrayal. Their ship had been destroyed, forcing them to crash land on this planet. They had not chosen Earth. They had simply survived long enough to reach it. She listened without interruption, weighing truth against deception. Their wounds were real. Their exhaustion was real. The haunted look in her eyes mirrored the same emptiness she had seen in countless veterans who returned home broken by endless campaigns. Whether deserters or criminals, they were soldiers, and soldiers understood one another even across species. Still, trust did not come easily. She locked their weapons in a shed, warned them that betrayal would be answered swiftly, and made it clear this was her land, her rules. They agreed, perhaps because they had no strength to refuse, perhaps because they recognized authority when they saw it. Days passed. She fed them what little her stores could spare, watched as they recovered enough strength to stand, and noticed how they instinctively formed patterns of watch duty, guarding each other even in recovery. They tried to repay her, awkwardly helping with chores, though their alien physiques often turned simple tasks into challenges. One attempted to mend a fence post and snapped it in half with too much strength. Another misunderstood the use of a shovel and nearly overturned half the soil in the garden. The mornings no longer felt the same after the 5 aliens came under her roof. Silence, once a companion, was broken by their movements, their strange speech, their attempts to adapt to the routines of her ranch. She watched them struggle with tasks that came naturally to her. Their hands, built for weapons designed light years away, fumbled with ropes and tools. Their bodies, meant for battle in artificial environments, did not move gracefully across rough soil. Yet they tried, and she recognized effort when she saw it. It reminded her of recruits on their first day, unsure of themselves, eager to prove worthy. She allowed them to learn, correcting their mistakes only when necessary. Her commands were few, but they carried weight. They obeyed not because they feared her, but because they recognized something in her bearing, authority that could not be hidden even under the worn clothes of a rancher. Gradually, words began to flow more easily between them. The translation device, awkward and imprecise at first, adjusted with use, creating smoother sentences. Through these conversations, fragments of their past emerged. Each of the 5 had left behind a life built on obedience to a system that saw them only as expendable assets. They described ships that spanned miles, armies numbering in billions, worlds stripped bare to feed the machine of war. Their voices carried bitterness, shame, and exhaustion. One spoke of a comrade executed for questioning an order. Another recalled the silence of space littered with corpses after battles where no side claimed victory. They were deserters not because they lacked courage, but because they had realized the war they served would never end, not until it consumed everything. She listened without judgment, though inside she felt the weight of recognition. Their words were alien, but the meaning was painfully familiar. She, too, had served causes that demanded endless sacrifices, Each generation fed into the furnace of war. She, too, had seen the broken return home with little more than scars and nightmares to show for their loyalty. The more they spoke, the more she understood that war, whether fought by humans or aliens, was the same beast everywhere. In return, they asked about her, who she had been, why she lived alone. She answered little at first, but as days stretched into weeks, fragments of her story slipped out. She told them of campaigns fought across deserts and mountains, of young soldiers who trusted her to lead them through chaos, of battles won at costs too high to count. She spoke of the days she left, when medals and honors felt like ash in her hands, when she realized she no longer believed in the orders she was given. She had stepped away, not because she was weak, but because she no longer wanted blood on her conscience. They listened with the respect only soldiers could offer. In their eyes, she saw recognition, the same haunted look, the same weariness. In those moments, she ceased to be merely a farmer offering shelter. She became something more to them, proof that survival beyond the battlefield was possible, even if scars never truly faded. But peace was fragile. She noticed in the skies first. Distant flashes, too regular to be natural, too deliberate to be ignored. She recognized reconnaissance patterns. Someone was searching. The aliens noticed too, though they said little. Fear lingered in their movements, in the way their eyes darted toward the horizon whenever the air grew still. They knew their pursuers had not given up. She prepared without announcing it. Old habits resurfaced with precision. She mapped the land as though it were a battlefield, noting vantage points, lines of cover, choke points. She adjusted the barn doors so they could be barricaded quickly. She cleaned weapons long left untouched, testing their reliability. She taught the aliens how to use the terrain to their advantage. Their training had made them efficient soldiers in the open field. But here, on uneven ground with thick brush and sudden drops, they moved like amateurs. She corrected them, drilled them, taught them how to think like hunters instead of prey. They resisted at first, their pride stung by her criticism, but she broke through with the same blunt force she once used on human recruits. Your enemies won't care how advanced your weapons are if you don't know how to use the land under your feet, she told them. They listened after that. They learned how to stay low, how to mask their movements, how to disappear into shadows. She showed them how to turn farming tools into weapons, how to build traps from wood and wire, how to think like defenders with nothing but their wits. They adapted quickly. Despite the gulf between their species, discipline bridged the distance. In the evenings, when training was done, they spoke again. They told her about their empire, vast and merciless. They described the punishments awaiting deserters. Execution, erasure of their names, the slaughter of their families if discovered. They had risked everything to escape. But in fleeing, they had carried with them knowledge of the Empire's tactics, weaknesses, and structure. That was why they were hunted so relentlessly. It was not only desertion. It was what they knew. Knowledge was more dangerous than weapons. She considered the implications. If Earth remained hidden, perhaps the threat would pass. But if the hunters discovered this world, if they marked it as a place where deserters could find refuge, Earth would be drawn into a war it was not prepared to fight. Humanity had its strengths, but against an empire that spanned stars, it was a vulnerable target. She understood now the stakes were larger than her ranch. Still, she made her choice. She had lived her life by one rule: those under her protection would not be abandoned. She had taken the 5 into her care, and that meant she would stand between them and whatever came, even if it meant drawing the fire of a galactic empire onto herself. The first real test came on a night thick with fog. The animals stirred uneasily, their instinct sensing what human eyes could not. Then came the faint hum in the distance, unnatural and sharp. A drone passed overhead, sleek and metallic, scanning with beams that cut to the fog like blades of light. The aliens froze, panic flashing in their eyes. She did not hesitate. With calm precision, she raised her rifle, aimed, and fired. The bullet struck true, shattering the drone into sparks that rained silently into the field. The sound carried far, but it had to be done. The aliens stared at her in awe, their expressions a mix of disbelief and respect. They had seen technology brought down by her unshakable hand, by a weapon crude by their standards yet devastating in her grip. It was not the rifle alone that impressed them. It was her composure, the steadiness that came from a lifetime of commanding under fire. They understood in that moment why she had once been feared and respected across her own world.